So Audrey, you'll just need to unmute.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Chapter and Verse again. My name is Audrey Henderson. I'm a member of the Jamaica Pond Poets. Jamaica Pond Poets is a sponsor of Chapter and Verse. It's a long-running reading series. It's now in its 25th year, so we're delighted about that. Jamaica Pond Poets buys all the readers' books, and they're recorded and in the Jamaica Plain Public Library for anyone to borrow. We also have links to buy the books, and I encourage you all to do that. When we're not in our Zoom boxes, we're very fortunate to have the use of the Loring Greenough House in Jamaica Plain. It's a historic building, a Georgian mansion. I believe it's on the list of on the Register of Historic Places, and it's run by the Tuesday Club. They saved the building from demolition, and they're always interested in more people who want to join the cause of historic preservation. So if anyone is interested in that, they encourage membership. Let's see, we have three wonderful readers, and I'm going to be your MC. Our readers tonight are Sheryl White, Mark Pawlak, and our very own Dorothy Derifield. As Susanna mentioned, we encourage you to linger after the readings and chit chat, and it's only one day we'll be able to have refreshments and be back in the room, and I hope that comes sooner rather than later. Let's see if I said everything. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our readers. Our first reader tonight is Sheryl White. Sheryl is an artist and writer. She has been published in Solstice Literary Magazine, the Roanoke Review, the Boston Globe, Split Rock Review, Gravel, Woven Tail Press Journal, and the Comstock Review, among others. She is a recipient of a Massachusetts Cultural Council Poetry Finalist Grant and was twice selected for the Mayor of Boston Poetry Program. In 2019, she was a Pushcart nominee, and in 2021, a Best of the Net nominee. Her chapbook, Sky Gone, was published by Finishing Line Press in 2020. She is a coordinator of visitor engagement and exhibitions at the Arnold Arboretum. Very glad to hand it over to Sheryl White.
Thank you, Audrey, very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and a special thanks to Dorothy Derifield for inviting me, and Sandy's story also. For much of my life, I was a professional artist and continue to identify as a fine artist, perhaps because once paint and color infused me, they were embedded forever. However, now, when I have time, I write, and usually poetry. My poetry takes many forms and formats, and I'm going to share some with you tonight. The first readings I'm going to do are from my chapbook, Sky Gone, which was published in 2020. A special nod to my friend Joyce, who I think might be here, for the actual words Sky Gone, which I lifted from a poem she wrote. Once a pretty well-known poet told me that if you want to take somebody else's words, take their best. And so I feel that I did with Sky Gone. Joyce's words resonated with me as I was living through the year after my father's death. The metaphor of a sky being gone allowed me to work my way through each month of loss. He died in the month of January. Sky Gone 1, January. Sky gone, still from my window, where there is no window, no light, absence, no heart larger. Walls of flesh and vein still beat, but breath gone, going far up the sky. Gone shudders into night, endless pulse, 365 and counting down. We did not stop, held his wrist tighter, did not demand a recount, scene flash, the projection sliced like slides fast on the whitest of screens. Clouds covered the air's emptiness, wide like once was the sky. Remember? Remember? It was blue like our eyes. Sky Gone 5, April. Put away, closed, buttoned up in its drab cloth coat, sealed and tied with string, packed off, sent packing, left on a doorstep, abandoned by the side of the road. Who snapped the closure, zipped, hooked, and eyed once the dust settled? The empty room is just the empty room, windowed on nothing, nothing left in the house. Sky Gone 7, June. From here, replaced by proxy, dark stuff, litter of ash, broken buds, empty Samaras piled in the corner of a cloud lost, like something half dead at sea, floatwood, water soaked, lifting, sinking, brushed by the fin of a dark thing, thrown up into a hole without access or egress, sun barren. Infinite mornings of fire, close, far, indeterminate of distance, start just there in their hour, just here in the meadow, clovered bereft, bordered by a forest of char, of nothing but the forgotten fruit it grew from. Sky Gone 9, stooping in rhythm for whatever it was that they might find. Colin McCann from Transatlantic. It pretends a painful cerulean while my mother sleeps, the only place she isn't gone, down, placed under dreams and my father's cold, short, cold blanket. I have no words for her, no replacement of the gone of anything. My own hovers level with the horizon, waits for something else to appear where the wide bruised arc blooms, empty, where color smears a shattered bowl, glaze unfired blue, temporary, easy to chip and craze, color that tears off in longing, in winding sheets, easy to imagine any other color, not as easy to find where color sleeps or how to wake it. Sky Gone 11. In the black, the sickle moon, blue ween to the other side of my earth. Right side up, side down, side. Each camel falls hump first, legs akimbo. All water drains, spatters a starless field. A dark cloud-colored wind knits its first scarf. Kite rows cast of thin new needles, skeins to pearls, drop their cape over absence. A naked abscess births above us. Someone retrieve the cape. Someone else find our night vision glasses, our one size fits all headgear. Someone find the sky. Sky Gone 18. You may do this, I tell you, it is permitted. Begin again the story of your life. Jane Hirschfield from Da Capo. Again, below, or two above, level with my eye, askance, peripheral, dead on center, none of this. A blue past, thunder holder, rain midwife, it was something. A big deal, super arc, hull of cloud, hanger for the crow, the red tail, each bee drone, angel and angel maker. Throw the earth wet high, sow islands over my head, simple canopies of earthen silk, whistle the moth, the evolved beetle, net and tag starlings with discrimination, tight bow bag, careful the egg. Provide seed, ginkgo, pine, white, red, black, raise a hedge, dig a moat. Let us figure out how to get there and what to call the new ocean. Sky Gone 19. So we packed our bags, heavy with assumptions in the lining, answers wrapped in an extra case stained at the seams. If we walked 1,000 miles, we walked back and forth up the switchback of the world, long days taken to cross Atlantic pools, search small caves along each shore. We brought copies of Goodnight Moon for the children. Damp, we stockpiled peanut butter, cans of tuna sealed in packs of 3. More days and a desert crossing. Water was gone, bayous, creeks overflowed too far south. Our collateral misjudgment followed us in dying white pine forests. We remembered melt, grave solitary stones and yards of bones. Animals we knew from the ark or zoo. Once answered, we were beckoned. Pitch your tent, unpack, lie down, imagine stars. Sky Gone 20, December. Not yet 1 year gone. Light hues break upon the earth. Swish and the bird is other. Look up clouds and stars, invent a face, reinvent form above oak and pine, mimic true, unfurl their new lit banners. A flag sure, mast high waves, no hands left, still bone has its memory. Skin shivers, a pulse, again wrist held. On your day, no cake, no gift. I will hold my breath, dream of small fires mirrored in my mother's eyes. Fires to ash, ash sifts down through my fingers, down to earth, then up again into the sky. Morning Sky 22. This gray on blue, this light on bark, gold scents the air, sweet shadow, short in morning, leaves left through this winter hang, tremble. Gone lives, tethered slim to thin red leaves. I ache to step into this, move one foot in front of the other, unbow my head, and walk out into the shortest month. The stilled bird song, the forgiving soil, dark marked shallow by so many footprints leading away. This year's sky, 23. It is here in the garden, above and around salvia celebrants, umbrella pine, bursts of morning light, miscanthus. After the night rain, dawn strips into full, into glisten, marmalade dahlias and the gifted gold of each last daisy's eye. Appetites cease, beginnings lost to the sinensis of the leaf, but ends, awaited ends, celebrated, where there is no blue, color plays like color burnished, a vain highlight over rouged leaves. Every glisten of seed head, fruit blush, every berry, the perfect berry, fall into earth under the vast waked sky. Writing these and other poems from Sky Gone did help me work through my father's death. I assure you that all my poetry does not center on death and healing. However, my mother died during the peak of the COVID pandemic, and I couldn't be with her. So again, writing brought me ways to grieve and to recognize that loss. Reading about raccoons after my mother died. I loved his poem until the dog died. I felt nothing warranted such grief. But there it was, a line 2/3 through the long verse. Now I don't remember the context. Oh yes, raccoons, their begrudged ability for omnipotence. A writer touches eternity with each word, must rise to her best place, study fear and pain, plumb anatomy's secret muscle and organ, dive, not skirt the guts, living and dead of earth, all her parts. Yet I would drift in silence over unrisked pages, notice breaks and rhymes slant, special, clever, various double meanings, but couched clean. Never meant to stir or storm against my heart. I can't take that one step more to end there where I hold the scream, or let it go. Watch what might be left. Shared pain, lost peace, lost dog. Year 1. 1 year since I saw you. A long year longer, unique circumstances, additional weight, virus rampant, age reached bones, muscle, extreme loss in an instant. A minute lengthens, hours collapse, weight of time, no momentum, heavy. Did this year seem half again as much? 2 years? Or too short? An abbreviation, quartered life. Will next year need to make up in compressed minutes or added months? 32 days per? Each leap year with an added leap, go for broke, add a week. Did summer complete? Fall an exception? Leaf and fruit unchanged? Was that winter reeling through July? When I write now, my abiding faith is in nature and how it nourishes me. And that continues as a strong focus made more crucial in the face of climate change. Air, water, known, visible, outdoor, not close, no, short minutes away. Could it still lap my naked, my dry? I see true, gulls patterned sky, starlings out this window high, yet with purpose, direction, clues. Winged my years scatter, childed certainties, self-named fall untrued, awareness late, sour, privileged words, while earth waits, falters, falls. What water clears, stays clear, returns restored. What ice calms, refreezes, increases. Which trees reroot, bud, leaf out, after fire, rot, loss, regain, sure. I cannot walk short minutes. Let them lapse. No long minutes left us. Birds disappeared. A leaf holds water. Some beauty remains far into November. At ceasing, certain light where wind moves on fallen leaves, high enough, only blue sky to see. Some green clings, more than some if I'm counting. Trees know nothing of surfeit heat in the northern part of this equation, or do they? Does late senescence remark? Perception, synapse, root, leaf, cells moan, lean times, final piece, suspension. When new days impede sense, hold some beauty, commitment to endure. No winter storms by time, no bending crazy bold. Water, no ice. When wind becomes too soft, November too soft. This theme of loss, but perhaps hope, continues with my poems from the Ark, which is a book that I am writing. It's all about the Ark, but the title of the book is Ark, A-R-C. The first 3, Amzara, Muskrats, and Passenger Pigeons, were published in Woventail Press Journal. Amzara, the wife. Bone built, bone thin, bone weary wife, cleaner of chattel, goods stower, turner of cheek. Into this shower, torrent, torment, harbinger of flood, this stuff that washes dreams, drowns infants, into all crowds you come striding, sorting couples, summoning the check, vanquishing lust, ordering the dinners, paying bills, gathering coats, furs, wools, solving arguments, allaying fears, cleaning the bins and mangers, wiping noses, wicking lamps with ease and patience, saving more than 2, seeds dry in a hidden seam of your holy linen apron. Muskrats on the ark. It was you two, slick-furred, love-damped noses from the tunnel under the pond. Did you hear some call? Was there a trumpet or bullhorn, a lure of mussels and rushes? One of you had to know there would be questions. Did you leave kits naked as herrings wrapped in the cattail lodge? Rat-tailed, bullet-eyed swimmer, high-dried on a cubit of midden, cubit of cypress, drowning day by day in the chaff of beast breath, a swamp of beaver, goose, and fox, endless teams of two waiting for a chance to jump ship. Passenger pigeons, emerald-hued, soft-winged, your mast flight pattern dark, like gales of angels swooning. Thick-roosted sky blackeners, wind-nested progeny begot in an endless web of leaves under cover of cloud. Givers of food, small roast of skin and flesh, sport for the meek, target. In the final book, a numbered accession for a coming dearth of belief. You are two, safe in the storm. You will be 10 after 40, 40 within the blink, 40 million within the end of time, written unless the tide turns and the boat capsizes in an oily brown surf. Whales beside us, right there, sperm and humpback, killer mocking the arc-bound predators, beluga, blue, blowhead, bottlenose, beaked, an endless riot of blowholes, breaches, gray, thin pilot mink, each something akin to magic, then gone into a net like the lobster, a tight corset of bone, oil like the countless dead flora and fauna drifting onto an ocean floor, gone to a scent to attract and entice humanity, at least, at most. At each far end of the world, a dolphin wonders, flying seaside beside the wooden hull. Do I accompany this traveling earth to paradise? If I lead it there, will there be room for me to dance? Fireflies over the ark. Bioluminescence locked in the forest unseen. Then the flies flow and the ladies ease out in star-thronged waves. A sizzle, a fry, lights out until a glory emanates from now to then, heart to eye and back from summer's swelter, sparkle, call out millions like a Milky Way high in cypress canopies or low under in gambles. Fire bright, golden, iridescent allures, lures, teases, promises of the best. Show lovelorn beasts another route into their lost dreams, lit sure for the many, real enough for any two that come into the light. And in closing, a few years ago with very special friends, I spent a New York evening watching as thousands of those fireflies lit up the forest. A physician, an attorney, a computer director, an academic, a poet, and an economist. Night of the Fireflies. He said, like the stars fell from the sky. Take them apart, I said, letter by letter, number by number. See how they add up. Crunch each one. Luciferase, wings splintered, stilled, dissolved, assets lost to time. It was fire, I said. It was magic. Love in the night. Love in the night. He said, I'm an economist. Ever, I said, you are a poet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheryl. That was wonderful. I love how your work the grief goes from the personal to the universal. And I noted what to call the new ocean. Gosh, what to call it indeed. Our next reader tonight is Mark Pawlak, whose book-length memoir, My Deniversity, Knowing Denise Levertov, was published in fall 2021 by Mad Hat Press. He is the author of 9 poetry collections, most recently Reconnaissance by Hanging Loose, and the editor of 6 anthologies. His work has been translated into German, Spanish, Polish, and Spanish, and has been performed at Teatro Polski in Warsaw. His poems appeared widely in anthologies such as The Best American Poetry, Blood to Remember, American Poets on the Holocaust, and in the literary magazines New American Writing, Arrowsmith, and Mother Jones, among others. He teaches mathematics at UMass Boston. Please welcome Matt Pawlak.
Thank you, Audrey. And thank you to the Jamaica Pine Poets for inviting me to read tonight. It's a real pleasure to read, to hear Sheryl's work, whose work I hadn't heard before, and to read with my dear old friend Dorothy. Tonight I'm going to share 2 excerpts from my memoir, My Deniversity, Knowing Denise Levertov. And my focus will be on the powerful influence on Levertov of Russian writers, primarily of the late 19th century. Then I'll conclude my reading tonight by reading her long poem, Conversation in Moscow. It may strike some of us as odd to bring attention to Russian writers when Russian troops have invaded Ukraine and are perpetuating inhumane bombardments of civilians there. But the spirit of Russian literature that inspired Levertov was one that championed humanistic values. Those writers were against the Tsar's autocratic rule and against the oppression of the peasantry. Turgenev's sportsman's sketches, to give one example, was instrumental in persuading the gentry and Tsar Alexander II to abolish serfdom at the time of the American Civil War and Lincoln's proclamation freeing American slaves. I'd like to dedicate my reading tonight to the Ukrainian people and our fellow writers and artists there. I also want to celebrate the bravery of the thousands of citizens who have taken to the streets of Russian cities to demonstrate their opposition to Putin's war, knowing that they will be brutally beaten by police, arrested, and imprisoned. So I'm going to begin with an excerpt from a chapter called Musketeer. So in the 70s, early 70s, Denise Levertov was my poetry mentor. And this sort of describes one very intimate period. Denise moved across the Charles to West Somerville from Brookline Village a decade before the Red Line subway was extended from Harvard Square to Alewife Station. Back then, circa 1973, Davis Square was a sleepy Irish, Italian, and French-Canadian working-class backwater. Her house on Glover Circle was not on a circle at all, but a cul-de-sac, 1 block outside Davis Square. That year, she began teaching at Tufts University. She could walk to the campus. I lived just 10 minutes away in North Cambridge. Denise was in many ways a jealous guardian of her creative space, but towards me and a few other proteges, she was generous and giving of her time. She afforded me countless opportunities to talk with her at length about poetry, politics, and life in general. I was welcome to stop in at Glover Circle anytime. Much in the way that her publisher, James Laughlin, New Directions, has described Ezra Pound tutoring him in Rapallo at his Esuversity. The instruction Denise offered me was informal, taking place across the kitchen table while she opened her mail, over shared meals, or during walks in the park. Other lessons took place while picketing or marching in the streets against the Vietnam War, as often as when we attended lectures, movies, or poetry readings together. So my Deniversity kind of borrows the Ezra Pound idea of his Esu-versity in Rapallo. Denise was in the habit of opening and sorting her mail each morning at the kitchen table while sipping coffee or nibbling a light lunch in the company of her secretary, and me too, if I happened to be also there. She made separate piles for bills, for poetry business, for letters from friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, for books and magazines, and for circulars. News of mutual friends or poet correspondence were the first envelopes she always opened, often reading them aloud to us from their letters. When a copy of a literary magazine arrived that she thought we might find interesting, Denise passed it on to us. One night, I accompanied Denise to a rare screening of The Childhood of Maxim Gorky, the Soviet film adaptation directed by Mark Donofsky. It was shown at the Harvard Epworth Church, one of the several venues offering foreign films back then. Denise had seen it in New York many years before, but it was my first viewing. We were both so excited afterward that, immersed in animated conversation, we forgot to catch the bus back to North Cambridge as we had intended. Instead, we walked and talked and walked a mile or more up Mass Ave from Harvard Square, past Porter Square, until we finally parted company for our separate homes. Basil Bunting, English poet, who was also an attendee at the Esu-versity of Pound, said that one of his mentors said this of one of his mentors. He put up with our presence at times when he must have found us intrusive, merely because the young learn from the old and the old must let them. Bunting was writing about W.B. Yeats, but it's a description tailored to fit Denise too. Now that I am old myself, Bunting added, I realize how much kindness was necessary to show such tolerance. This is a section from a chapter called My ABC of Reading. Denise shared with me anything she was reading that excited and inspired her. I did likewise. Whatever her newest enthusiasm, I went right out and read it too, and sometimes vice versa. Often I was discovering for myself writers whose work Denise had gone to school on long before. But occasionally, my excitement after reading one made her go back and reconsider the work again, reappraising and deepening her appreciation of that writer, or so she told me. The great Portuguese modernist Pessoa was an example. I was amazed to discover the poetry he'd written under a variety of heteronyms, each distinctly different in style and subject matter. Denise admired his poetry too and thought his talents were unique. Denise was passionate about the great 19th and early 20th century masters of Russian literature. In prose, Turgenev, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and her beloved Chekhov. Among the poets, Pushkin, Blok, Akhmatova, Pasternak, and Tsvetaeva. She in turn caught the infectious enthusiasm I had for the work of early Soviet writers like Mayakovsky, Yesenin, Babel, and Postovsky, among others. We didn't always concur. When our opinions were at odds about some author or body of work, she would hear me out, parse the precise points of disagreement, and then patiently explain to me, without being pedantic or condescending, why she held firm to her view. She usually chalked it up to differences of taste, but there were a few occasions when she felt that I was just dead wrong, and she told me so. Gorky was one of the authors whose place among the pantheon of great Russian writers we disagreed about. I valued some of his socialist realist prose a lot more than she did. But what we did agree about with regard to that so-called father of Soviet literature was his autobiography. We were both smitten by it, especially the first volume, My Childhood. We also both adored reminiscences, Gorky's memoirs about Chekhov and Tolstoy at Yasnaya Polyana, Tolstoy's country retreat, a place Denise had once visited. Not one, but two well-thumbed copies of Remembrances sit in my bookshelf today, but those two copies give me a pang of guilt. I had originally borrowed the book from Denise's personal library. After devouring its contents, I just had to own a copy for myself. It was then out of print, but I scoured used bookstores in Cambridge and Boston, and there were a lot of them back in that day, and eventually found a copy of the exact same edition. Afterwards, with my own copy in hand, I must have neglected to return hers. I suffer no such guilt over my copy of Kropotkin's Memoirs of a Revolutionist. That volume had been the personal possession of Denise's mother, Beatrice, who shared with Denise a devotion to the ideas of the anarchist prince. Denise presented it to me as a memento after her mother's death because near the end of her life, I had befriended Beatrice in Oaxaca, Mexico. This fervid indoctrination to Russian literature points to one of the most important things I learned by observing Denise at close hand, namely how, as a poet, to read widely and deeply, assimilating influences without becoming imitative. She had the ability to absorb lessons from the writers she admired in what I can only describe as elementary terms. She would often respond to my inquiry about what she had learned from writer X or Y by saying, "I'm still chewing on it," or "I haven't entirely digested it yet." Eventually, the fully assimilated insights she took from each one mixed with others in what Henry James called the well of unconscious cerebration, and later emerged as something wholly her own. So those are the two excerpts. I'm now going to read her long poem, and it's quite long, Conversation in Moscow, from her collection Freeing the Dust. It's a kind of verse drama set during the early 1970s when she visited the Soviet Union. And the poem has 5 characters. There's Denise, her female Russian translator, a Russian poet she met during that junket, a Russian historian, and a biologist. So it requires a little setup. So I've already mentioned Kropotkin, the anarchist prince. Late 19th century, although he died in the early 20th century, he believed an anarchist who believed in self-government and commune-like communities, self-governing commune-like communities. And he espoused the principle of mutual aid, both among individuals and species, as opposed to a kind of social Darwinist competition and survival of the fittest. And it was the principle of kind of mutual aid was something Denise applied to her teaching of poetry. The Decembrists come into play here. So in 1825, there was a failed attempted coup against the Tsar Nicholas I by the military class in Russia, and many of them were hanged or exiled. A generation later, they inspired the radical nihilists who assassinated Tsar Alexander II. So there's a mention of the nihilists in the poem. Turgenev is mentioned. His novel Fathers and Sons depicts the generational conflict among the Russian aristocracy in the mid to late 19th century, the sons being influenced by the nihilists. And Nechayev is mentioned as well, and he was perhaps the most famous nihilist or infamous nihilist. He was ruthless and fanatical revolutionary who believed, any means justify the end of overthrowing the government. His Catechism of a Revolutionary, which was published, inspired the Black Panthers later, and the Italian Red Guard. Nechayev was a model for the radical revolutionary protagonist in Dostoevsky's The Possessed, in Joseph Conrad's Under Western Eyes, and Kotze's The Master of St. Petersburg. So he was quite a powerful figure. So let me now read Conversation in Moscow. Red wine from the Black Sea, glasses filled and refilled, Georgian shish kebab has been eaten, plates pushed back, voices of other diners surround us. Sometimes the five of us speak at once. So much is lost. We are all in our 40s. It is perhaps 10 at night. The woman who is our interpreter knows. She knows poignantly. Now is the night she must speak for us. People look around to see who's coming, all members of the tribe of the word. Chairs are pushed back. Swing door lets out moments of kitchen chatter. She knows she must be each of us turn by turn and each at once. I see their eyes, the fat poet I barely know, but surely love, who pours the wine quietly, his eyes kind, small, and sorrowful. Blue eyes and a tan face, the veriest azure eyes I've looked to ever. The poet's trusted friend, historian, fresh from the re-examined lives of the nihilists. Will you have ice cream? The waitress, returning and leaving again. Pale eyes of the biologist, pale face, white beard, though not old. He's okay, a good guy, but the others know things he doesn't know. He has the aura of limits. And I am looking from one to the other, trying to read language and gesture, grasping what Russian words I know, turning to her who so often looks either acutely anxious or deeply amused, my sister, the medium, interpretress, oracle, to give me what these brothers are saying. For there's a spirit has touched us, pulled us suddenly close. Frown lines and laugh lines leave her face. She is looking upward through smoke to the high ceiling and through it searching. Each cell, the biologist says, has in it the whole body's potential. And I think of the module, of detail giving to Inkscape its signature, the great web of analogy. But it seems he implies some kind of determinism. I've been saying, I don't see enough communism here, no struggle toward a classless society. Communism to him is only the best we can do with the historic, the social shell in which the creature lives unregenerate. The historian faults him. But I lose that. People come by, greetings exchanged, red wine from the Black Sea. She searches and finds the eloquent, accurate words of translation. The poet now, out of the stillness, is talking. Poems, he says, poems are of two kinds, those with mystery, those without mystery. And are poems without mystery poems at all? Well, yes. One cannot say a poem well made, effective, but unmysterious has no value. But for myself, I prefer the mysterious. And Dostoevsky? Why is it he, who is so often clearly reactionary, pessimistic, all for personal redemption and against common action, anti-revolutionary, why is it he, the 19th century writer I see the most read, most loved in the Soviet Union? Whereas Turgenev, for instance, whose work surely, I think of the sportsman sketches especially. But Dostoevsky, the historian and poet, are both speaking. Who reached as he did into the hot and strange, the cold and shadowy, the intricate depths of life? We read him because in him we know our own darkness and illuminations, tortures and ecstasies, our human reality. Tea in glasses, thick black coffee. Vodka? Vodka. To serve the people, I venture, is often thought of wrongly, narrowly, merely a mutual encouragement. But to serve the people in truth, one must do, I think, what Pasternak said one must do, excel oneself in order to be oneself. To serve the people, the poet again holds us in his hands. We are listening shells to whom a heartbeat speaks. To serve the people, one must write for the ideal reader, only for the ideal reader. And who is that ideal reader? God. One must imagine, one must deeply imagine that great attention. Only so in lonely dialogue can one reach the people. After our musing silences have traveled away and each of us, each on its own road, and returned again to this night, this place of meeting, island of our eternity in the bustle and clatter of passing time, now the biologist, pale, skeptical, yet afraid, yet a friend. I see he's at bottom innocent, as only the trained skeptic can be, whose imagination is weak as fine hair. The biologist is telling, when I asked if anyone reads Kropotkin, that Lenin said after he talked for hours with Kropotkin, "What a charming old man," and shook his head and added, "But he understands nothing, nothing." But later, Lenin sent a train, a special train, back and forth to the place where the old man lay dying, only to ask each day after him. He smiles. He is pale and gentle. To me, it seems, I say, going slowly, waiting for her, she's ready. To me, it seems perhaps Kropotkin understood half of what we need to know, and Lenin perhaps knew half, and true revolution must put these two halves together. A flash of sapphire. I hear the historian's words and understand them and wonder. My woman friend repeats in English, "How young, how pure." I'm abashed, though he is speaking without mockery, almost tenderly. I, young, pure? Well, I am 2 years older than our friend here, the poet. And what have I spoken of but doubts of perplexity? Human doubts, human longing, he utters the words solemnly. Human longing for ineffable justice and mercy. In these lies purity and the worth of men's lives, new as a birch bud in spring. His mind has touched, moved into and out of, as if into sea-carved hollows bristling with hidden spines, venomous tentacles, the life of Nechayev, killer, shaman. He has known the sacrament of the absolute. And then he says, in the end, we must follow Christ. Is he joking? I turn to my woman friend again, confused. No, the historian says, understanding my question, I am not joking. I am speaking of spirit, not dogma, but spirit, the way, not the corrupt church, bejeweled priests with dirty beards prostrating themselves before the atrocious czars, the indispensable beggars encrusting the entrances of every shrine, kissing with pus the infinite insensibility of relics. Not this, but the frail trust we have when our hearts flutter and we look each to each and our eyes hold the way. And the poet, it's midnight, the room is half empty. Soon we must part. The poet, his presence, ursine and kind, shifting his weight in a chair too small for him, quietly says and shyly, the poet must never lose despair. Then our eyes indeed meet and hold, all of us smiling in common knowledge, even the palest spirit among us, burdened as he is with the weight of abstractions. All of us know he means we mustn't, any of us, lose touch with the source, pretend it's not there, cover over the mine shaft of passion. Despair somberly tolls its bell from the depths of, and its wildest joy sings out of too, flashing the scales of its laughter, laughing improbable music. Grief and delight entwined in the dark down there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was wonderful. You brought us into that room, and I think it was a moment we all needed to have this week. Thank you. Our next reader is Dorothy Derifield. She needs no introduction to this group, but I will introduce her anyway. Dorothy is the director of the long-running literary series, Chapter and Verse in Jamaica Plain. She is also a member of the committee that directs Rosie Reed's poetry series in Roslindale. She is the author of the book Zero Plus Time from Cherry Grove Collections and a chapbook, The River and the Lakes. Her work has won an editor's award from Plain Songs and has appeared in the Radcliffe Quarterly, among other journals. She is a member of the Jamaica Pond Poets and lives in Roslindale. Dorothy, please take the floor.
Okay, thank you all so much for being here tonight. And thank you to Mark and Sheryl for such beautiful readings. I just wanted to say that I am the co-director of Chapter and Verse with Sandy Story. I want to make sure Sandy gets her due credit. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, which, as you probably know, at least back in the day, got a lot of snow. And they used to pile it up on each side of the road in these huge, huge piles, castles, we used to call them. The Snow Queen was the quintessential fairy tale of my early youth. And this is a poem called The Snow Queen. In the white nights of the northern city, summer swells and breaks into his hand, the quartered petals of a damask rose. On their powdered skin, he sees the veins, pores. He feels the invisible webs that pull the leaves toward death. The shape eludes him. By handfuls, he crushes them against his skin. The bee sting feels curiously warm. Darkness begins to wash back down the sky. He feels the receding light pull the heat from his fingers. His body becomes light, anchored by the ice in his heart. Bending into autumn, he waits. On the vast plain of winter, the snow whirling from ground to air is her cape, her arms opening to him. Every city and town in Minnesota had its own festival. In my town, it was called the Water Carnival, and it took place in June. And this poem, which is in 3 parts, is called Water Carnival, 1948. The parade. We are the small decorated cakes, the crepe paper confections, yellow and white, threatening to melt into the June asphalt of Main Street, down to the river. The mothers, rayon flowers of summer, hats and high-heeled shoes, bloom still in the black and white lens time of the fathers. We do not care about the mothers, the hours of ruffling, pinching, and sewing. We care for the prize money, sweaty and real in our fists, viciously kicking our skirts past the dark-eyed men in their booths, their exotic dolls hanging always out of reach, toward the music of the carousel, the open teeth of the spinning machines. The pageant. Still light when they float each tired princess over the river to the diving platform, glowing out of the dusk. Young men will dive from the tower, and last year's queen will sing Blue Moon. When the boats reach the golden stairway, the girls in their frothy dresses will be lifted like puffballs to climb one by one toward the empty throne. Fireworks break over the mothers, watching the carnival sky fall in pieces onto the water. The dream. The dark eyes of carnival dolls follow you past the booth, sticky heat, candy, and dust, lights turning into sky, into river, and crepe paper flowers dissolve against the dam. And your second prize ball gown crunches in the wheel's teeth, burns its colors into your heart, the secret neon tune at your window. The mothers laugh far away, unaware of the moon staring through the screen door, conspiring with the dolls, even as they lie waiting at the end of the bed. Sandy's story came to our poetry workshop one morning with a poem about cheese and a delightful quote from G.K. Chesterton: "Poets have been mysteriously silent on the subject of cheese." So this is my cheese poem, Kraft American. The Kraft plant was on Lower Main Street, near the river and the Minnesota Western Rail Line. It had the highest brick smokestack in town, toppled by the tornado of '51 and rebuilt of non-reflective metal tubing. The manager of the Kraft plant lived on Upper Main in a house with fancy awnings in the summertime. I had a crush on his son when I was 15, and he was a graduating senior. I dreamed that he had knocked up his previous girlfriend, a nursing student, daughter of a single mom, so the son of the plant manager didn't have to marry her. And it was true. This is the way small town American cheese is. I used to like to say that I was a rebel in a small town and my cause was getting out of that town. But this was sort of like the end of my time there. It's called Virtue, and it borrows some lines from George Herbert. Sweet day, so cool, so calm, so bright, the bridal of the earth and sky. The dew shall weep thy fall tonight, or thou must die. Why is it virtuous to rise early? Oh yes, the sunrise is beautiful. I saw it often that summer driving home from the lake with you passed out beside me and the others asleep in the back. Sweet day, so calm, so cool, so bright. The windows open and the fields undulating soft in the slanted light. Your cheek still so smooth it barely needs shaving. The bridal of the earth and sky. The young corn ripples where the wind slides over it. As we drive into town, July sun reaching for us between barns and houses, the boy in the back seat calls the name of the girl who married someone else, and the one he hardly knows answers from her sleep. The dew shall weep thy fall tonight. We try to wake you, then park in the shade, let you sleep it off. I came out here to go to college and stayed, as so many of us do. And I ran into people, met people in various capacities that came from backgrounds that were utterly unfamiliar to me, of course. And looking back on it now through a long, long telescope, I wrote a 3-part poem called My Psychopathic Lovers. He was the son of the Carnation King and spent his days rolling barrels of money from bank to bank down Wall Street. He paid the cabbie to let me dance on his car and the bartender for drinks past closing. He paid the night to be warm and the wind to be light. Only the moon would not oblige him. Then he paid for rain so we could cry. From a line of Lutheran churchmen back to St. Olaf, he lost his faith in God, he said, but not in science. And the long black tables where the formerly alive could be probed. But even here, there were flames waiting to be lit. Oxygen turned to heat. Every breath a garden, and under each leaf, a snake. 3. His grandfather was God's podiatrist. He owned the feet of all the world. Listen, he said, to the sound of stilettos on the pavement. It is the music of money. So we drank to that, to the straps that bind and the toes that pinch, the slick wine of leather on leather. Kalua, he said, holding up his liqueur, is the name of my dancer at the high-low. And I said, then she throws herself into a volcano. Bird of Paradise, 20th Century Fox, 1951. I don't know how many of you here ever saw that movie called Bird of Paradise. Deborah Paget, I believe it was, who threw herself into the volcano at the end. We were quite enchanted with it when we were about 7 years old. For a long time, I volunteered at a nursing home in Jamaica Plain called Sheryl House. And I worked with the chaplain there. And one of the things that the chaplain, with this brilliant idea she had, thanks to the suggestion of one of the residents, was that we have a poetry work, not a poetry workshop, but a poetry appreciation hour. So I would go there with a group of poems, which were loosely connected in some theme or fashion. And I would read them, and then we would talk about them. And it was a very popular group in the nursing home. Volunteering in a nursing home is not oppressive. It can be very encouraging because people are so kind. This is called teaching poetry in the nursing home. There are days here when I wish I were the angel of death. Not in this room where Edith says, sure, it's a good day, I'm alive. But on that other floor, which is the first circle of hell, or optimistically, purgatory. My grandmother peeled a whole bag of potatoes and put them in a pot, feed a long ago threshing crew. The potatoes boiled down to a blackened mess while she wandered the field with her suitcase and a tablecloth. Twice a year, my mother drove 300 miles to see her mother, who didn't know her or my aunt or anyone. Much later, when she was ill, my mother's only prayer to the empty sky was, please, kill me before that happens. Edith finds death insulting, but also says life wouldn't be worth much without it. The poet we're reading laments death and everyone nods, but secretly thinks some haven't died soon enough. This is called It Was Summer, It Was Winter. I read to her and her manicured nails scrape the table. I knew her when she laughed and talked. Now I do not know where she is. If I touch her, she pulls back shaking, and I do not know what she sees. I fear her fear, wouldn't you? Don't we all fear that? What? Do you think it is white, an endless corridor of sheets, or black? Is it dark like a night in the woods, trees felt not seen, no stars, or probably gray and shapes and silence, or something else? And we, the others, the unremembered one, who sit here saying, oh yes, it was summer and the tables lined the sodden grass, and I changed the place cards to be next to her. It was winter and slippery on the frost-stained bricks, and time was fooling us faster than we knew. But here, she said, here is a gift you already have and lost over and over, but we persist with these questions. Where have we gone? Do you remember? What did we do? You remember what we do, I do, sitting here on these wooden chairs. I have been, like most of us, I'm sure, thinking a lot more about, even more than I have in the past, about where we're headed, where our environment is headed, climate change, which is fact. And I find myself writing these days in a certain kind of way to deal with it, because deal with it in a straightforward way is so painful. So it comes out in a sort of strange way, a little bit detached or odd. What is called What the Winds Are Saying. It is winter, and Demeter stalks inside to turn up the thermostat. She should thank her son-in-law for the oil and gas. But really, isn't it the least he can do? It's plenty warm down there in the dark where they eat all the fruit she sends them. Still, she's heard rumors. Boreas on the street today looking seedy, like he'd been hitting the bars all night with some hot little nymph from the Gulf Stream. And her good friend Zephyrus giggling. Trailer park scheduled for demolition. It's an ill wind, whistling that little tune. Demeter slumps in her chair. Her daughter never calls, never writes. She only comes earlier because there are no cell towers in Haiti. I was given a beautiful vase with lovely flowers painted on it. And the card with it said that it was made in South Africa and it was made out of recycled Coke bottles. And this charmed me. I absolutely love this. And so this is the poem that came out of that. I was once a plastic bottle. Before that, I was a dinosaur, dead in a nest of ferns and horsetails, sinking down and waiting through endless summers, aeons of winter, to become a Coke bottle, thrown next to a dumpster in Joburg. We are all crushed and melted over and over. A placemat, a cell phone, a black container for Chinese food. Even you might one day may be a bad smell in the air. A piece of jewelry in a fancy shop just this side of Orion. We all go home sooner or later. Charismatic megafauna. No one blames us for the extinction of the dinosaurs or seems to regret the rise of the mammals. Or it is true that the history of life on Earth is mostly the history of. The panda sitting in my chair is reading the New York Review of Books. Where did you get that, I ask. At the office, he growls in Chinese. His sad black patches accuse me. You don't love the snail darter enough. I protest that I never pull up the milkweed. Pawlak, he snorts derisively. Beauty. I am guilty. My love for the monarch butterfly greatly exceeds my regard for the nematode, much less the countless billion microbes who keep the whole machine running. My hot bath could exterminate a complete new species of bacteria under my fingernails. I know that doesn't trouble you, the tiger says. Don't even pretend. Here, have some of these delicious chocolate-covered. I'm sure Kropotkin can find some way to get the tigers to all live together and become vegetarians. Those of you who remember the late 60s and early 70s may remember that there was a spell of time when all our musical artists seemed to overdose at the age of 27. And the trend seems to continue, if you remember Amy Winehouse. I was thinking about that and how the tragedy of the the young death of so many of our artists. And I wrote Meditation on Sic Transit Gloria Mundi. I saw your book dedicated to a dear friend on a dusty shelf in the dump store in Alstead, New Hampshire. I gave them $1 and took it, so I had the book. The Bizarro comics feature the same crown that Basquiat painted into his picture. I have learned to love Jean-Michel. I have never learned to love Keith Haring, though his death was even sadder. A rapper with a worldwide smash overdosed age 21, still owed 6 years. What happened? We give flowers to the little girls next door, and they make pictures for us with colored chalk on the sidewalk. The drawings look like Keith Haring. Art is for everyone, said. More people leave tokens on Jim Morrison's grave than any other. If you want people to remember you, you'd better die in Paris. Now, some of you may understand this better than others. They always say getting old is not for sissies, but they fail to tell you that it's a full-time job. This poem is called The Cosmic Gravity Tax. There are mornings when getting out of bed is a peculiar misadventure in this galaxy I seem to have landed in just a few light years ago. Where I came from, getting off the ground was easy. Trampolines, helicopters, rocket ships, even stairs could take you where you wanted to go. Here, there is uncertainty Heisenberg never dreamed of. Schrodinger's cat has never been seen boxed or unboxed. Every day, the scene shifts in unexpected ways. What shall we explore first? Standing, falling, crawling, or just lying in wonder at the flatness of it all? Now, you may not be aware of this, but spring started yesterday. And I know this because when Jeffrey and I went out to look at the yard, we found the first crocuses had opened, their little beautiful purple heads. And that for us is the first day of spring. So I will end this reading with a poem called Vernal Equinox. Just yesterday, the clear air shattered under her voice. But today it softened, folding itself around her words. Cries became songs. Even the wind had changed his tune. She saw this happening as she saw the task of the hands is to make small movements, dividing then from then. In that smell of fertility and decay, the task of her hands is to drop seeds, knowing some will die, not knowing which ones. Thank you all so much for reading.
I think we can all unmute, can we?
Oh, yes. Ooh.
Didn't actually make noise.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dorothy.
I wish we were in person. It is so strange to be reading into total silence.
Yeah.
Because at the Loring Greenhouse, you always hear creaking and people moving about, and every once in a while someone will whisper to someone else. This is that's I think one of the strangest things about Zoom.
I think tonight it was silence of deep enjoyment. So I think you can imagine that happened.
Oh, I will definitely. I will definitely imagine that.
Yeah,
Right.
it was a delight to hear your poems and to Cheryl's poems.
All of you. Yeah.
I want to thank Mark particularly for being willing to write such a beautiful little blurb on the back of my book. Thank you, Mark.
It's a great book. It's a
Lovely.
great book. I was happy to do it, really.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was reminded of the power of the poems and the way you capture your Minnesota, you know, childhood and adolescence, and it's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, that sense of the sunlight, it's so powerful. It's almost like a physical substance, the sunlight on the sidewalks.
Such a lovely reading. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm
Mhm.
going to have
Thank
to
you.
read your book again, Dorothy, because I loved it and I want to read it again.
I wanted to say that, you know, because many of us know Judy Katz-Levine, and the conversation in Moscow was actually printed by by the Hovey Street Press as a special little chapbook, which I have a copy of. It was kind of a radical 70s movement press, and it was a gift that Denise gave to Judy and Barry when they were as their wedding gift.
Oh,
Yeah. Uh,
nice.
I just dug out my copy the other day. It's a
Oh,
lovely
That's a
little gift.
fabulous, fabulous poem.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great poem, yeah.
Thank you for
Um,
remembering that.
It's Judy.
Hey, Judy, yeah.
Hey, hey, Judy.